Okay, we're done with the money side now of the political parties, of how a president runs for office. Now, again, understand that there is a lot of differences here. If I was running as a House member or as a senator, if I was running as a governor, or a mayor, or state legislature, something like that, things would be quite a bit different here in talking about this. There'd be different rules, different regulations. Some things are the same. There are some parts to it that would be similar, but I just made this into the presidency basically because, again, that's the one that most of us all follow and kind of keep up with. So the next step now, after you have been checked over by your party and they look at you and say, okay, you meet the eligibility requirements, you have a good character, there's nothing in your background that's going to cause us to have a big problem, all of this other stuff, okay, then it gets into the next part. Just recently, just I think it's today, when I was recording this, I was watching a news show about Chris Christie, who is a governor from New Jersey, who is looking at possibly running for 2016 presidential election, and he now has a huge scandal going on in his administration, dealing with some things about whether or not he tried to go after a mayor who did not support him when he was running for governor by shutting down his bridge. Of this mayor's city, so that it was hard for the people to get back and forth across this bridge, back and forth to work and everything, and causing a great strain. And that was putting a damper, putting a harm on that city's economy there in New Jersey. And if this scandal is true, well, then this governor, Chris Christie, his chances for running for president of the United States is going to be virtually wiped out. So having a good character is vitally important to running for president of the United States. And it's really going to be interesting as we get into class and start talking about the election coming up here. And of course, it's only 2014, but people are already looking at the candidates running. It's going to be really interesting to see how this turns out. All right, so nominating and electing a candidate. American elections system has two different campaigns. One is for the primary, the other is the general election. We're going to focus on the primary here. Presidential primaries usually last 10 months, but here in the last couple of years, the last couple of presidential cycles, we have seen that this has gone even further back. I mean, like I said, it's only 2014 right now, and the election's not until 2016 for the next presidential, and we already are talking about presidential candidates trying to get things set up because they have to have so much money, so much time put into it, everything else, that actually now these primaries, presidential candidates are even going back to as much as 16 months, a year and a half before the actual primary to start looking to run. All right, so the ways to nominate a candidate. One is through self-announcement. That's where the candidate just gets up and says, hey, guess what, everybody, I'm running for president of the United States. That's traditionally how it's always been done. Another way that you can get a candidate to run is what's through a caucus convention, okay? And basically a caucus convention is where the voters from the state all get together, and they basically at a certain point in time, they say, okay, everybody for this candidate, you go stand over there. Everybody for this candidate, you go over here. And then they count all of those people up, and whoever has the most amount of votes for candidate whatever wins. Okay, a primary, that's what we're going to talk about here, is a direct primary. That is where a candidate basically wins by a vote, an election. Okay, and most states today do it this way. Self-announcement is basically a lot for smaller type of nominations, where you don't have two people going against each other in one party or something like that. That's more like for local elections and those kind of things. Conventions and primaries, this is more for state and for national elections. The last one is through a petition. And so if you guys, if you want to get somebody to run and you think they'd be great, you can do it by petition as well, although not very many have ever been done that way. The results is basically then the candidates get selected. They run against each other in the general election then, and we have one winner. The primaries get started in January of an election year. So 2016 is the next presidential election. So in 2015 so basically 2 years from now, we will have, or actually 1 year, I'm sorry, 1 year from now, we will start having primaries come up. So January 2015 is when the first real primaries will get started. Traditionally, it's always been New Hampshire and Iowa who started. They don't have to. There's no law, no rule, although there is no parties have rules on this, but there's nothing in the Constitution that says these two states have to start it. It's just been through tradition. Some states have tried to overshoot these two states and start ahead of them, and usually the parties knock them back and don't allow it. Now, New Hampshire is a primary state. Iowa is a caucus state, so there is a difference between the two. The purpose of what you're trying to gain in these primaries. Now, remember, a primary is where you got candidates running against each other from the same party. You can only pick one candidate per party to run. So let's say that, in 2012, we had 9 Republicans running for their party's primary. The purpose of the primary is to do really 3 things. One is to gain the money and the momentum in order for you that you can build up your name recognition, build up your popularity, all of that, and to get that out there. The next big thing is you must also gain media attention. You got to get people to start focusing in on you and take you as a serious candidate. The main big thing, though, the second really huge thing there is to get the delegates. Okay, that is essential. Without the delegates, you're never going to get the nomination. Now, a delegate is a party official who basically gets to be the voter of the party as to which candidate they want. So you choose these leaders to represent their state. These delegates are party leaders chosen to represent the state. The parties decide how many delegates each state gets. So again, nothing in the Constitution here on any of this stuff. It's all set up by the parties. And every party decides on how many delegates each state gets. And then the candidate runs in that state. If they win those delegates then. Some states combine their election with other states to make them more popular and more powerful. That's like Super Tuesday and Southern Tuesday. Parties also decide whether a state is going to be a winner take all. So you have the election, you have 9 candidates run, and candidate C gets the most votes, then they would win all the delegates. No matter how close the election was. If it was just within a few percentage points, it doesn't matter. Some states are done by proportional. So they delegate it out by the proportion of how many votes you got. It just depends on how the states want to do it. Here is kind of the breakdown on the election calendar of how the states go. And we're going to kind of take a look at this a little bit more clearly tomorrow in class. Okay, the primary map and drawbacks. All right. The difficulty of primaries for politicians is this. To mobilize their base, a person who's running for a party, for let's say president here, in order to get their base, that is their political base to support them, so the Republican base or Democrat base, without alienating independents in order to win the general election. That is the biggest difficulty. In other words, here's how it looks. If I'm running and I'm running in a primary and I'm running in the Republican primary, I've got to try to be as conservative, as fiscally tight as I possibly can. So I'm going to want to cut unemployment. I want to get rid of Social Security. I want to wipe out Medicare. I don't want any government spending at all. But that's going to tick off not just the Democrats. Because remember, how our political, what our system runs, only about 30% of the voting population out there is strictly Republican. Only about 30% of the voting population is Democrat. The other 40% of people out there, the majority, are what we call independents. They're people who don't pick a political party, they pick the candidate. So if they're listening to you bash all of these things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and they're not going to vote for you. But in order for you to be a Republican candidate to win, you got to do those things during the primary. So it's really hard for a candidate to be really left or really right and not be in the middle in order to win. Okay, and that's one of the biggest problems that they run into there. Some of the other drawbacks of the primary system itself, big one, voter turnout. Very few people turn out for primaries. Okay, so here again, you hear about candidate A got 60% of the vote. Okay, how many actually people voted? If only 15 people showed up and he got 60% of the vote, okay, then he only got, 10, 12 votes. So it sounded deceptive when you hear about these elections results in some of these states, because the candidate probably really didn't get that many votes because people just don't turn out. That's the horrible thing, is we have a very bad turnout system of voting in this country. So that is a really big drawback. Another drawback of the primary system is it's very costly. Remember, every state has to have a primary or a caucus. And now they don't have to, they can decide not to, but they have to pay for it. The states do. And it can cost millions of dollars for them to run this primary every 2 years and 4 years for the presidency. And so some states just sometimes don't have it. In 2012, most states didn't have a Democratic primary because it was a given fact that Barack Obama was going to win for the Democratic Party. Nobody else was running against him. So basically, most states didn't even bother to do the Democratic one. Now, in the next election, there is no incumbent president, so all the states will have to have a Republican and Democratic primary, which is going to be very costly. And again, it's usually the taxpayers who have to pay for it. Lack of voter information, or lack of informed voters, I should say, because again, people a lot of times don't take the time to listen to what the candidates are actually saying. They'll just come out and say, "Yep, I'm voting for the Republican because I've always voted Republican," even though the Republican could be a real idiot, or vice versa with the Democrat. So that's another bad thing about the voting primary. Okay, that is the end of the second presentation. Again, hopefully you're keeping up on the listening and keeping up on the reading. Really, remember, if the download of these videos is taking 5-6 minutes, take the time to read your books, and that will really help you out.